Good morning, Marijuana Nation. It's Wednesday, September 6th, 2017, and you're tuned in to episode 324 of Marijuana Today Daily. I'm your host, Shay Gunther, and I'll be walking you through today's marijuana news and headlines. As always, we have a full and busy day of cannabis news in our hands, so let's jump right into it. Our top story of the day is a piece by my buddy Johnny Green over at Weed News that highlights just how awesome the recent news is that my friend Shaleen title has been named to the Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission, an advisory board that will help the state implement adult use legalization. In full disclosure on this one, I am completely biased here and agree with Johnny's positive coverage, as Shaleen is a good friend of mine as well as a regular on our weekly podcast, Marijuana Today. In short, Johnny points out just how important it is that someone with Shaleen's activist background as well as her total command of the issue be on the commission, which has a number of appointees who are actually against last fall's adult use ballot measure. Swing over to Weed News for the full rundown. As always, we have all the news we cover linked to on our website at mjtodaydaily.com and on our Twitter account at mjtodaydaily. German Lopez over at Vox News has a good write-up of Pennsylvania Congressional Representative Tom Marino, who was just tapped by President Vladimir Trump to head up the White House Office of National Drug Control Policy, or ONDCP, making him the nation's so-called drug czar, which actually is a fitting title for this administration. Representative Marino is a well-known drug warrior with a long history of voting against any progressive drug policy measure that came his way, and is on the record as suggesting that non-violent drug offenders be remanded to, quote, hospital/prison, unquote, for mandatory drug treatment. This is not someone who will be an ally to legal marijuana. This is another good one to open up in full, as it's important to understand the people making the bad decisions on the other side of this issue. Our final top story of the day is the sharp drop in the price of legal marijuana as seen in the Washington state market since adult use sales spooled up in mid-2014. With prices starting north of $20 a gram in July of 2014, the shackles of prohibition falling away have meant an accompanying drop in the retail price of legal cannabis as it starts to approach the $5 gram level just 3 years later, with future price drops expected. This is obviously an enormous issue for the industry, as the price of cultivating cannabis is the first number in a lot of financial models tied to things like edibles, concentrates, and even state tax policy. Those are our top stories for today. It's time for Marijuana Today Daily Headlines Blitz. Before we blitz out on headlines, let's quickly thank our sponsor, MJ Today Media, publishers of this podcast, our weekly show Marijuana Today, and the ever so popular MJ Today Media newsfeed, which gives you all the day's industry news stories, all 50 or so headlines, organized by location. Subscribe to the newsfeed today if you haven't yet already over at mjtodaymedia.com/newsfeed. That's mjtodaymedia.com/newsfeed. All right, time for the blitz. Marijuana Business Daily's chart of the week shows how the legal marijuana industry stacks up against all U.S. businesses in terms of percentage of racial minorities in executive positions, with legal cannabis having 17% of its executives identify as a racial minority in an online survey conducted by MJ Biz Daily last month. That survey had a total of 567 responses from people who said they were founders and owners or senior level executives involved in legal marijuana. The 17% for legal cannabis compares to 13% minority ownership or leadership across all U.S. businesses. As Massachusetts works to implement legal adult use sales by next July, some experts in the state are warning that the legal cannabis supply will be constrained in the industry's opening months, as too few cultivators will be up and running in time for its launch. A new study conducted by researchers at the University of Oregon found that interstate sales of marijuana between Oregon and Washington state sharply dropped in the days following Oregon's adoption of legal adult use sales. One of the shallow criticisms that prohibitionists raise about legal cannabis is sales diversion to non-legal states, but as the new study from the University of Oregon's economic researchers suggest, the amount of cannabis leaving the state was not that high to begin with, at just under 12%, and has fallen even further to 7.5% now that Oregon has joined the legal cannabis club. Of course, diversion won't be an issue anywhere once all 50 states embrace sane marijuana policy, but that's a story for another day. A small technical college in Ohio is stepping up and offering to become the state's first certified marijuana testing facility. 3,000 student-strong Hawking College said they plan on starting an academic program focusing on cannabis certification that would be built around their state testing regime. So far, the college is the first and only school in the state to do so, with a deadline for applying coming up on September 22nd. Georgia State Representative Alan Peake should be a familiar name to regular listeners, as the Republican politician and businessman has made a name for himself in legal cannabis circles by not only pushing for legislative change for medical marijuana reform, but by going as far as to actually import and distribute cannabis oil to Georgia families in medical need. Last week, he told a group of college Republicans from the University of Georgia that he planned to continue his fight for further reforms of medical marijuana laws. This is a great one to click over and read. One of the things that should also be familiar to regular listeners is that my personal politics tends towards the progressive side of things, but I like to consider myself politically pragmatic and know that it's really important that cannabis is a nonpartisan issue. So I'm really excited to hear the news that Representative Peake is talking to young conservatives in his state about how important medical marijuana is. New Cannabis Ventures has an interesting story up about a revision made by Canadian licensed medical marijuana provider Marican to their annual sales forecast to take into account a recent windstorm that kicked up contamination into one of their growing marijuana crops, forcing them to dump millions of dollars in inventory. The interesting thing here isn't so much the $4.3 million write-down, but the natural fragility of any outdoor crop. Just as conventional crops like wheat and corn can fall prey to large natural phenomenon, so too can cannabis. Just one of those things our industry is going to have to figure out how to best deal with. And finally for today, the UK's Independent has a good long-form piece that looks at some of the complications from a cultivator's point of view of merging California's gray marijuana markets into their new fully legal adult use and medical schemes. This is another great one to read in full. Those are the headlines and news for the day. I'll be back with you again tomorrow morning with another information-packed episode of Marijuana Today Daily. But in the meantime, if you have any stories to share or feedback to give, zip us an email to headlines@mjtodaydaily.com. And while you're clicking around the interwebs, swing over to our Twitter account at mjtodaydaily and visit our website at mjtodaydaily.com to find links to all the news we cover. Thanks to our sponsor, MJ Today Media, and to all of our awesome patron listeners for the support that makes this show possible. To join the illustrious ranks of the patron listeners yourself, swing over to our website at mjtodaydaily.com and click on that big blue button at the top of the page that says Become a Patron. I'm your host, Shay Gunther. Thanks for tuning in and starting your day with Marijuana Today. Today.
One take, Shay. One take.